A couple months ago, I had an opportunity to go door to door and pitch my sale to get people to donate to a charity of my choice. And through that experience, there was a lot of ups and downs, and I can just remember the first house that I went to, and going up to that house, I was shaking. I was really nervous, and thank God I was met by the sweetest mom of two kids, because she's like, "You're like 15 and you're out here selling. Oh my God, I'm gonna give you $50. Oh my God." If she hadn't given me that money or donated that money to my charity, then I don't think I would have been as successful for the next 2 days. But from every house that I went to, my pitch just got better and better, and I ended up switching neighborhoods because I had hit all the houses. And by the first day, when I was done, I had raised $300. So the second day, I had brought a friend, and I went downtown Los Gatos, and I went up and down the streets and ended up having these really good actual conversations with people about the charity that I was really inspired to talk about, and it got people to donate a lot of money for the charity. So I ended up in total raising about $1,050 to the charity of my choice, and it was just the most exciting, exhilarating experience. And honestly, door-to-door sales, I'm hooked. I love it. But I realized that not everyone really has these kinds of skills that I might have. So I realized, like, hey, I'm good at this. Where do people that have these skills go later on in life? Does it turn into a career? Where does it go? Well, I'm here today with an expert marketer, but she didn't always know that she wanted to work in high tech. Once a nonprofit worker, now leading global teams in Silicon Valley. I'm here today with Karen Park Jones. Stay tuned to explore her career journey. Welcome to Job Explorer, the podcast that unveils the fascinating journeys of extraordinary professionals. From CEOs to artists and entrepreneurs to authors, join us as we explore and ignite your passion for the professional world. This is Job Explorer, where ambition meets inspiration. I'm your host, Nelson Kramer, coming to you from KCAT Radio. Hi, welcome to Job Explorer. Actually, I'd like to recognize that we are in a new studio. After 8 months of doing a podcast, I am transferring it over to a professional format. So I'd like to recognize KCAT for letting me use their equipment in studio. And yeah, let's get into the interview. I want to ask you, what do you do in your own words? I want you to describe what you do right now at career-wise.
Hi, Nelson.
Hi.
So here's what I do. I run a global partner marketing organization at a company called Workday that's based in Pleasanton, California.
That's really cool. Can you walk me through your day-to-day life of working at this company?
Absolutely. So I've been there for 2 weeks today. Actually, Friday today was my 2-week. Been only there for a couple of weeks, so it's new. So right now I'm figuring out the cafeteria, how to actually get food, where to find a pen. They bring dogs to work on Wednesdays, so trying to decide if I should bring my 2 Labrador retrievers with me, maybe. So a lot of right now is just learning, talking to a lot of people, a lot of meetings, both Zoom and in person, which is fun because we're actually out back in the office. So right now, not all as much work is happening as much as just I'm kind of the new kid in class.
That's really cool. You've only been there for 2 weeks. What did you do before?
So before I joined Workday, I was at a company called Ernst & Young, EY is the way we talk about it. And there I was also leading their global partner marketing organization. And so working with our technology partners like Microsoft and IBM and ServiceNow and SAP, and how we sell together with EY services.
I'm kind of seeing a trend of technology, high tech in these jobs right now. Let me go back to your roots. What was your first job?
Well, my first job right out of college was with a museum called the Coyote Point Museum for Environmental Education. And I was their volunteer coordinator. and I was paid a whopping $23,000 a year.
Rich.
Very.
Do you think any of that experience has gone into what your work life is right now? Any skills that you think transferred over?
For sure. I think that every opportunity, every job, every kind of career opportunity that we have, I think we learn stuff. It's sort of kind of always be learning. So I would say that the opportunity to work with people, network with people, learn new skills. I learned some. It was a nonprofit, so there was lots of hats to wear. So while I was hired to be a volunteer coordinator, I did a little bit of everything. So I was designing graphics for our black tie affairs. I was writing press releases. I even did laundry for the enclosures with the people that manage the animals. So it was a little bit of everything. So I think that sort of entrepreneurial spirit, maybe, of you got to do what you got to do to get the job done, was probably very much birthed there in that very first job.
Yeah. Where was this museum located?
It's in Burlingame, California.
Okay. And where did you go to college?
I went to college at Cal Poly University, San Luis Obispo. And then it's a very bit of a story there, but they cut my major. I'd been there for almost 5 years, and they cut my major. I was a journalism major. So I ended up graduating from San Jose State University. I was there for about 6 months to finish my degree.
And that's, how did you find your first job?
Let's see. I don't even remember how we found it, because there was no Craigslist. There was no LinkedIn. It must have been through a job board, probably very pencil and paper at the time. I don't even think I had a job description. I think I saw that they wanted a volunteer coordinator, and I was interested in nonprofit, and I thought it sounded interesting.
Yeah. What are some differences that you can find in working now at a high-tech company in corporate and working for nonprofit?
I think nonprofit is a great training ground, learning ground. It was for me anyway, to be able to do a lot of different things, wear a lot of different hats, and not to be afraid to do that. And I think that transfers into tech. It's particularly marketing within technology companies, is you kind of be willing to raise your hand when you see an interesting opportunity or something that interests you or that interests the company, to raise your hand and say, yeah, sure, I'll try that. And, let's see how that goes.
Do you like the idea of kind of being a jack of all trades, just doing everything, just exploring what you like? And is that kind of like how you found your love for high-tech marketing?
I don't know if I found the love for high-tech marketing or it found me. I think, there are threads throughout the different jobs that I've had, and many of them revolve around people and connecting the dots, and being curious. And I think if you have a curiosity, and I happen to be someone who loved to write, and I was interested in, and I kind of was always curious about how things worked, and I enjoyed kind of, we say, getting stuff done or getting shit done is kind of the GSD is a mantra, I think, of myself and my teams, of things that we do. So I think all of that was good preparation for finding a job in high tech, but it wasn't necessarily where I started. It wasn't what I was interested in.
And we did talk beforehand about your entire journey, just a little debriefing.
It's very long.
I don't have the whole story for it, but you had mentioned that you were an event planner. How did that? Tell me about that.
Well, I learned through the museum, kind of sparked my interest. There was a lot of events happening at the museum, and I thought those were really interesting, and I got involved in those. And then I left the museum to go to the Mountain View Chamber of Commerce, and I ended up being a program manager there and running their Art and Wine Festival. And they have the oldest, largest Art and Wine Festival on the West Coast, which is probably an unknown fact. And I really enjoyed the opportunity to kind of like run something that big and that interesting. And one of my favorite things to do there was they would send in, artists would send in the tapes for the music. And I got to listen to all the different tapes, and actually me as a very young person got to decide what acts were on, with no background or experience in music, but I got to decide what was on the main stage at the Art and Wine Festival. So quite fun.
Yeah. Do you do some event planning in your your newest job, or have you gotten there yet?
We do actually, and event marketing is actually a big part of partner marketing, which is what I do. So it's actually interesting how that has sort of continued on through my career. And so I think event planning and, event marketing is a really important part of getting the word out, and in in-person events and in venues like this, whether they're webinars or online experiences. So yeah, absolutely, it paved the way.
Yeah. You also worked, I'm telling your story at this point, but you also worked at Adobe for a whopping couple of years. I don't know how many years. Was that kind of your start for technology? Because you went from museum to high tech. Well, how did that work?
How did it work?
What was the transfer process? What's going on?
Interestingly enough, so I was at the Stanford bookstore. I was their director of marketing. They had 3 different bookstores, and it was a lot of event. Were a part of that because we had a lot of really interesting authors that would come in, and Tom Wolfe and like big name people that would come and speak at the museum, at the bookstores, and so at the university. So that was a really interesting experience. The first time I ever got laid off. So the company was bought. Or was taken over by a company called Follett out of Chicago, and I was laid off, so I didn't have a job. And at that time I thought, oh my gosh, now what am I going to do? So I put out my own shingle. I think everyone in Silicon Valley might have a founder story. So this is my small founder story. I started a consulting company called Eno Consulting. And I was able to kind of put my shingle out and get hired at different high-tech companies to do different marketing activities, whether that was building a website, writing a newsletter, variety of different things. And that actually got me into high tech. And that took me down the high tech route. And then I think I took a little pause and got interested in spas of all things. So my journey is not a straight line. My journey is a little bit of got a crooked road, but ended up doing some spa stuff and then came back to high tech.
For now, I'm very interested in like all of these first starting out jobs with the Mountain View Chamber of Commerce. You mentioned a wine festival.
Yes.
Is there like one specific success story while planning that you'd like to share?
Gosh, I think there was, there were so many different facets to planning that event because we had to pick all the different vendors that were on the streets. We actually had to, communicate and coordinate with the police department, the fire department, and shut down the streets. We had to work with the trash people. I mean, there were so many different components of it. I don't know if I can pull out one that is more interesting than the other, but I do remember I think I had 3 or 4 different walkie-talkies on my hip, and I would run around during the event trying to get everybody coordinated. So it was a very complex event, and it did definitely take a lot of people to make it happen.
You went to Cal Poly for 5 years?
5 years.
5
on the
years
5-year plan.
And you obviously Cal Poly and San Luis is a college town.
Yes.
I don't know why I know the statistic, but it has 44,000 people live in San Luis Obispo, and 22 or over half of them are Cal Poly students. So definitely a college town. And I actually went very recently, and I saw we went to the nighttime farmers market on Thursday
nights.
I think that what you're describing with the whole event planning, it honestly feels like that, like with all the police and the shutting down the streets and all the tents. And it's also like such a great community builder. Are there any like community aspects that you really liked in your first 2 jobs?
For sure, both. I think as a volunteer coordinator, right, I was pulling in people from the community to give tours and to share their love of the museum and of different, animals and environmental activism and those types of things. And so absolutely, it was a huge part of the community aspect. And at the chamber, it was very different because it was based on business and businesses within Mountain View, but supporting them. And I learned a ton. But the idea that the community really, people make a community. And so people invest their time. And it was really interesting to work with a lot of those different people who, these people weren't necessarily making a ton of money, but they were really interested in kind of a love of Mountain View and a love of making sure that the town itself, thrived.
Mm. You worked at, you're working at Workday, is that what it's called?
That's right, Workday.
And also Salesforce, you worked at Salesforce
That's
as
right.
well for those, that was for a couple of years. I hear a lot of sob stories about the communications between people in corporate and just the horrors of just evil bosses just making you work for hours upon hours, like making you do things you want to do. I don't know if this is just for a marketing kind of thing for this podcast, but I kind of want to hear a little bit of, the bad sides of working.
The horror stories.
I want to hear a horror story about working in corporate marketing.
Gosh. There are definitely personalities, I think, probably like any job or in school or wherever you are, right? There's people you click with and there's people you don't. And, some people have a different personality style. I know I've worked with people that, what's the analogy, right? If you're a hammer, all you see is nails. Or if you're a nail, all you see is hammer anyway. But the idea that, they kind of have one way of working. So I think, other horror stories, I wish I don't have any that are just, I think personalities can be tough. I've never had, kind of an experience that you talked about where, I had a miserable boss or maybe people I liked more than others, people I learned more from than others, but I didn't have any of those crazy experiences. I think, particularly now as a leader myself, it's really important to me to build team. And whether it's the team around me or the team that's under me, I think those things are really, really important in investing in people.
Yeah.
And so I think, the more you invest in the people, because I would say, at least my experience, it's a team sport. You don't get anywhere doing any of this stuff by yourself. So that to me is a really important aspect. But I wish I had. I should think about that. I don't know if I have a terrible horror story.
Yeah. I've heard a couple terrible horror stories, but we won't go into those. Okay. I loved your response. I'm your host, Nelson Kramer. We're going to take a quick break and be right back.
Thank you to the City of Montecirino for their continued support of KCAT Public Media. The City of Montecirino has enabled KCAT to inspire, educate, entertain, and inform our community through the magic of television and digital media for over 38 years. Thank you.
Welcome back to Job Explorer. I'm your host, Nelson Kramer, and I'm here with Karen Park-Jones. Over the break, I did have a little bit of a wardrobe malfunction during the first take or first half, and I fixed my hair this time, so we're all good to go.
It looks great.
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to lead back in with your job at Adobe since you worked there for a whopping 13 years.
Lucky 13.
That is a long time.
It's a long time.
I'm personally very into all of the Adobe products. I love creating, and they have every year they have a summit conference talking about all their products. And since you work in marketing for Adobe, I would like to hear your point of view on that.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, Nelson, because and for many of my jobs, I'm on the plane a lot. And I remember when I was on a plane with Adobe, and the person sitting next to me said, "Oh, where do you work?" And I said, "Oh, I work at Adobe." And they said, "Oh my gosh, you must know Photoshop. Amazing." I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to open Photoshop. So there was always a misconception that when you worked at Adobe, you were super creative. And not to say that I wasn't creative, but I I wasn't a power user of all of their products. However, I got to support. I actually have a fun story. One of my first jobs at Adobe was I was supporting product marketing, and they had so when they had boxes of software that you could buy at Costco or Office Depot or whatever, and so they were looking for different ways to show the different features and functionality of the product, and I had happened to have a little thing on my face removed, and so I had a Band-Aid on my face, and so they said, oh my gosh, that's perfect for our blemish removal tool. Can we take a picture? And so my little claim to fame is there's a picture of me from a box of software from early back in the 2000s where I am on a picture with a little Band-Aid, and then you see me without the Band-Aid.
Yeah. You mentioned on the plane that people mistake you for being tech savvy all the time.
Yes.
But you're more into the marketing aspect of it. So.
Correct. We help people get excited about the products, not necessarily using
your limits are email.
Exactly. Well, maybe say better. Yes.
Email and Docs, Google Docs.
That's right.
That interests me so much. Do you think that you've learned to be a little bit more tech savvy with all the Premiere Pro? Do you work with the features?
I don't. So I didn't ever, actually, and it's too bad because Adobe used to give a lot of classes for free for employees. But at that time in my career, very heads down with working on all sorts of different marketing programs and activities. And at that point, I had 2 small kids as well. So not a lot of extra time to take on learning new products. But I feel like I grew up at Adobe in a lot of ways because when I joined and then, spending 13 years at a company, and I'm very, very lucky. I had great people that I worked with and worked for. So I think it's, kind of where I cut my teeth on a lot of different job opportunities or job, the way that I kind of built my career has a lot to do with Adobe for sure.
Sorry, I was just writing something down really fast. I'd like to talk about you had 2 small kids, you mentioned quite a few seconds ago. How is it handling work-life balance?
Well, I think I learned that it's not work-life balance. I think it's work-life integration because there was never a balance, and you kind of had to figure out how to make it work as a working mom. And particularly at that time, I had a very demanding job where I was supporting our head of sales from a communications perspective. And I used to call it, I was on the bat phone a lot, where, kind of calls coming all day and night. And you just kind of have to figure out where to create space. So I didn't ever figure the idea of balance. It was more, how do you integrate those 2 things so that you can be successful at all? And I think sometimes I was probably more successful, as a mom, and then sometimes I was more successful as a marketer or somebody working within Adobe. So they didn't always work out.
Yeah.
It's hard.
When you find yourself not as successful at your job, do you often learn from your mistakes, or do you find yourself getting corrected on it a lot?
I think you learn. I also think there's decisions you make. So you think, oh yeah, I want to do that. I'll take that on. And then knowing like, gosh, I don't have any extra bandwidth, between family life and work, that I just don't have the extra time to do that. And if I do it, it's not going to be great. And so it's hard to kind of put your hand down sometimes when you really want to, that's the thing I want to work on. I'm in. And I was super lucky because my husband is a massive, partner in crime with me. And so we were able to kind of balance a lot of the stuff. But it's, I think you figure it out. It's not a, definitely, you learn where there are good things and bad things and maybe where you do well and not. And I've always been told feedback is a gift.
From working at Adobe, you have kind of seen the ins and outs of working at, in corporate.
Yep.
Did you have any corporate experience before?
Not to the same degree. I had done as a contractor or a consultant. I had done a lot of kind of, fly in, do a project, fly out. at Adobe, I really got into the guts of a company. I was quite fortunate to be able to work with our, what we call ops staff, but our CEO and a lot of our executive staff. And so I got to see a lot of how maybe the sausage is made, and some of that you're like, wow, that's really how that happens. So I got very lucky in that, and I think that helped propel me in many ways. I thought, I can do this. Like, this isn't that hard. Like, it was a little bit, Wizard of Oz. Like, I got to see behind the curtain in a way that I think prepared me or intrigued me enough to say, yeah, I want to keep kind of climbing the ladder. But I will say, I don't think my career particularly, and probably many others, is not like a ladder, right? It's much more of a climbing gym or a climbing wall. You kind of go left and right and up, to get yourself up. It's definitely, I think I thought when I started work that you just you just kind of keep climbing the ladder. It didn't work that way for me.
Yeah. You mentioned that you worked with the CEO a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're working as a product manager, executive person at Amazon, you're not going to be able to work with Jeff Bezos. Like, how? I mean, you didn't have any experience with corporate before, but how was it working with the CEO of Adobe?
It was really interesting. I learned a ton. My very first assignment, I guess, was writing a speech for the CEO to give to Cal Berkeley. And kind of fake it till you make it kind of experience where I thought, all right, I have no idea what I'm doing, but it's good. I can figure this out. So I, sort of wrote what I thought, and I did a bunch of research and homework, and ended up, we came back with some edits and we fixed it, and off he went, and he did it. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, this is wild. Like, I just did that. Right. Exactly. So it was really fun. And he's an amazing, super smart human and great leader. So it was interesting to work for him. And yeah, it was quite fun. So that was kind of an entree into, I leaned into a little executive communications, which was fun.
Yeah. Going from, Cal Berkeley to another place across the country, what about the travel aspect of working for a corporate company? I know that some people don't travel for their jobs. Some people are like San Francisco to Chicago to, I don't know, Japan. Like, what was the experience with that for you?
Yeah, I luckily enjoy travel. There was a good amount of travel, I would say, in a lot of my positions, and most recently the last 3 jobs or 4 jobs, yes, and definitely at Adobe. I enjoy it. I think there's something about being out in the field and talking to people outside of headquarters that you just learn a ton. Pre-COVID, right, there was a lot of travel. And then it was interesting. I was at Ernst & Young, EY, during COVID, and there was no travel. And so strange not to, it was just all those boxes on Zoom, and trying to create a team or try to get things done together that way was really difficult. I think it's a balance between family life too, because you have to, when you're gone, your spouse at home and your kids have to kind of figure it out. So the travel to me is really helpful for the job. It's hard on the family, but it's part of that integration. You have to kind of figure it out.
Going into, you mentioned quarantine. That was a huge shift for everybody.
Yes.
Did you find yourself not as able to work with a team when you're not with them in person?
It was really hard. I ended up hiring, I think, about 18 people over the course of 3 years to build this team, and I hadn't met any of them in person, and it was really hard to build trust, because we all have to work together. And so how do you build trust without physically meeting? And so, we got really creative on doing a lot of kind of the COVID, I don't know what you call them, the COVID online, meetings and things. We made pizza together. We did charcuterie boards. We did a cocktail hour together. We actually did some fun volunteer activities and some motivational speakers, but trying to do that was it was new for me as a leader, trying to build that sort of team in a virtual environment. So yeah, it was really, really difficult.
Just to kind of share a story of my own, and kind of my view into the corporate world, we had a guest speaker that came in during lunch, at Los Gatos High School, and she talked about the virtues of every employee at Amazon. Going from working at a museum from like a nonprofit where it's kind of just like volunteer work or low wage work, like it's let loose, just do everything you can to keep it alive, like or not. What do you think of when you think the shift between working kind of more in the field with the nonprofit to shifting to corporate and all these rules and all these virtues that you need to uphold within yourself?
Within corporate, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, it's funny, and this may sound like a funny thing to say, but nonprofit was really more of a tax filing status than anything else. And I learned that, was actually one of my big learnings from being at the Chamber of Commerce, that it's still a business. And whether it's a nonprofit or not, they still are running a business, and that translates obviously to corporate and other things. Things are different, but it's still a business. And I think, I think a lot of those tenets hold true. And I think, kind of for me anyway, that building that ethic of hard work and being willing to raise your hand and do things that maybe are not, in your job scope. I think a lot of that stuff, it translates for sure. And I think it's part of, maybe part of the learnings, and you can bring that forward and probably both ways, right? Bringing corporate to nonprofit. Yeah.
Does your company, or have you worked with nonprofit through corporate?
Very much, actually, in Salesforce, through Mark Benioff, is really big on giving back, and it's something that the business of doing good, and how important it is for corporations to play a part in that. And I agree with that, and I think actually it was part of we spent a lot of volunteer hours at Salesforce, and it was something I brought with me to EY with the team, and kind of like when we would show up to do a meeting, say in Santa Monica, we would also build in a beach cleanup as an example, right? It was something we did. It was just part of culture. And I wish more companies did that, because I think we're very fortunate and lucky working in corporate that we maybe get paid more so than someone in a nonprofit, but we can also give back.
Yeah. With a nonprofit, obviously it is a nonprofit, so you don't make as much money working there. My mom once told me, or she got a quote from this celebrity, like, if you do what you love, you don't work a day in your life.
Yes.
Maybe it came from you. I don't know. Maybe you came up with it. Do you think that kind of plays into what you do right now?
For sure. And I will tell you a story. I was on a plane not too long ago, and I was working on something on my computer, and this younger girl that was sitting next to me, she looked over and she goes, "What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I work in marketing." And she goes, "Gosh, it seems like you really love your job." And I thought, oh my gosh, that's such a funny thing to say, because I totally love my job. I have loved every job really that I've ever had. Of course, there are aspects, but I would say in general, super passionate for what I do. And I think in order to be successful, that's a key ingredient. If you're not passionate about what you do, I don't know how you are successful. To me, that's a big piece of it. So, yeah.
I may have missed the mark on this podcast just a little bit, but I kind of want to shift really fast into what you do as in marketing. Like, I want to know what a marketer does. What is it different from product management to marketing product to marketing digitally? What is marketing?
That's a good question. So I will give you a little bit of an answer on what partner marketing is, which is where my specialty is at the moment. So what I will tell you is that I think what's kind of unique about partner marketing is that we get to be a bit of a little mini CMO within a company. And what happens, like at Workday, we are partnering with different companies like Accenture, like Deloitte, like Adobe actually. And in order to grow the pie, in order to grow the Workday, what we're doing with our clients and customers, we have to grow. In order to do that, we need our partners. So it's this really cool kind of ecosystem message around like, yeah, we need all these people. We can't do it ourselves. And I love that, right? That's very team, and that's very kind of in my wheelhouse. Yeah.
Community,
exactly. And so what I do is help co-market with a lot of these companies. So we bring kind of I say very simplistically, it's 1 + 1 is 3. And that's what I get to market in the world, right? Is to talk about how Workday and our partners are really delivering really cool, interesting things for our customers and empowering our customers to solve their most critical business challenges. And what does that mean? That means that I get to help. We do advertising. I get to do digital advertising. I get to do social media. I get to do event marketing. I get to do content and thought leadership. And so it's like all the different aspects of marketing are part of what partner marketing is. So I personally find it super fun, and a little part of the business that is really unique and interesting.
Yeah. And even if you're not working directly in the field, it kind of feels like you're working in the field because you're specifically working for the people that you're selling for. You're not behind the scenes doing all the software data editing or whatever. You're digitally or emailing into the field, right?
That's right.
You kind of, now that you just described that, it kind of sounds like you got a lot from working at a nonprofit because of all the things you get to do now and how experienced you are. Like, oh, do you want to do this? Yeah. Do you want to do this? Yeah, I'll do that. Like, do you think that really played into that?
Huge. Every one of the jobs I think that I've had, starting with that nonprofit way back when, have built, kind of what I am today. And I think, if I would have sat back as a, 20, 21-year-old, 22-year-old and said, gosh, what am I going to do? What's my career path going to look like? I could never have sort of played out the way it went. And I don't think that's a bad thing, right? Because each thing kind of leads to the next thing. And I guess that's kind of what I was saying, like the climbing wall, right? Like you kind of go left to go right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on my podcast today. All your answers were great. I stumbled a little bit. This is my first one in this really nice studio. So thank you so much for being my
great,
first
Nelson.
guest.
Thank you for having me. It was great. Love to have the conversation.
If anyone wants to find Workday, what should they search for?
Workday.com.
That's awesome. That was a great interview with Karen Park-Jones, the marketing executive. Thank you so much for listening to Job Explorer on KCAT Radio. Tune in for the next episode in a couple weeks. You just listened to Job Explorer on KCAT Radio. Thank you for tuning into this episode. Check out our other episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. That's all for now. I'm your host, Nelson Kramer, signing out.